think that's one of the cool things about watches is that when we pass down a watch or we give a watch to somebody, we're not just giving the watch, we're not just giving the physical object, but we're giving all the things we achieved wearing that watch, all that that watch represents for us. We're giving more than just a physical object. We're giving a part of us to somebody else. As I said at the beginning of the year, I want to dive into more content outside of just gun stuff. Our lives exist outside of just the gun industry. We're into a lot of things other than just guns. So I'll continue to make gun content, but I want to start a new series this week called Watch Wednesday, where every Wednesday we talk about watches. But before we dive into that, I have to give a special thank you to Wolvyn Luxury Timepieces. Whatever it is you're looking for, whatever your budget, they have great customer service. They'll take care of you. They'll help you find the thing that you need. So if you're interested in getting something and you don't want to go the AD route, or it's something that's discontinued, or maybe something on the vintage route, or maybe you just have questions, those guys will get you taken care of. I'll leave a link down in the description, but they are making this series happen, so thank you to them. Go give them a follow on Instagram. They're big supporters of the channel and supporters of the 2A industry. So this watch content is gonna be a little bit different. I wanna look at it from the perspective of guys in the gun industry, guys who are into outdoors, into cars, guys who are a little bit harder on their watches, guys who wear them daily. Maybe you're wearing it on duty, maybe you're wearing it when you're working outside, when you go hiking, whatever it is. Just a different demographic of the watch industry than what we typically see online. And so that's kind of what my focus is gonna be. And I wanna focus on the stories behind the watches. It's not the watch that makes the man, it's the man that makes the watch. So I wanna focus on the men behind the watches, the stories behind the watches, the people behind these. That's what I'm more focused on. Yes, we'll talk specs. Yes, we'll talk, we'll speculate about new watches coming out and new releases and things like that. Yes, we will do that. But more so, I wanna get to know people and their personalities through watches, because watches do more than tell time. They tell a story. They connect us to one another. We have phones and TVs and computers that tell us time. We don't need watches to do so. For those of us that wear watches and are into them, or into them for a variety of reasons, they make a statement about you. They tell your style. They tell a story about you. They tell a story about where you've come from and maybe achievements you've made. So they hold a special place in our hearts. They're more sentimental than anything. And that's what I want to get into, because I think that's what makes watches so special. And I think that's why we connect to one another so much when we start talking about watches, or we see somebody else who's into watches the way that we are. Yes, they are an art form, and yes, they are a tool watch. And those two together tell a story about you, why you selected that watch, why you chose that color or that strap. There's just so much that goes into it, and that's what I want to get into. So I thought, what better way to kick off this series and kick off the first episode than to talk about the watch that got me into watches, which is my dad's two-tone Seiko. This two-tone Seiko clearly draws inspiration from the traditional Rolex Datejust, the two-tone with the white dial, the fluted bezel on a Jubilee bracelet. It is a quartz movement, and it does add in the day feature on it as well. It needs a service and it needs a battery. I don't know when the last time it was running, and as you can see, it was definitely his daily wearer with all the scratches and dings on the crystal and around the bezel. And then the bracelet definitely has some stretch in it. It is a 36mm watch with a lug-to-lug of 42mm, and it's just 9mm thick thanks to that quartz movement. Just an old school watch from the 80s.
Bought me and your mom a matching watch, and I used it to work. I love the band, the gold in it like this, and the silver. Back then, this is all we could afford, but it was a good watch. Before this, we used to buy the Timex. When I worked for the light company, I had my toolbox, and I had one little drawer on the side, on the left-hand side, and I worked as a mechanic, so I would take it off every day when I got to work. And I would set this in that little drawer. The only thing that was in there would be the watch and my keys. And back then we didn't have cell phones, so we didn't have to worry about that. We had pencil and paper. We had the quarters and dimes to call people. I used to put it there all the time, and I liked it, and I wore it all the time. I put it there because one time I was working on a piece of equipment, and I caught my take my wedding ring off and put it there also, because I caught my wedding ring and almost cut my finger because I got it caught doing mechanic work. But I did wear it all the time when I went out, or when I was home, or whatever. That's the story behind this watch.
For me, this watch became the quintessential watch. It was the one that when I closed my eyes at night and somebody said watch, that would be what I pictured in my mind, was this watch. And it's because I saw my dad wear it for years as I was growing up as a kid. I remember whenever he would go out with my mom on a date, or they'd go to a wedding or a Christmas party, the first thing he would do when he got out of the shower, he's coming up front, he's got an iron in his pants, but he would put on his watch, He'd start ironing his pants and put that god-awful crease down the middle of them that, I don't know why old people were into that, but he would crease his pants, and then, you know, he'd iron his shirt, he'd shine his shoes, and he'd get ready to take my mom out. And I remember seeing him wear that every time they went on a date or every time they went somewhere special. And I also remember when he worked at Kruger's Western Auto, we would go to work early because he would have to get all the service tickets ready. And I remember him wearing it on his wrist, and he always wore the face of it on the inside of his wrist. So he'd be writing service tickets, and I'd be sitting there waiting to go to school in the morning. And I remember every time he'd look down and write down what time it was and the date. And I just remember seeing this watch and this silhouette for so many years of my life growing up, that I have so many memories about things that my dad did, things that he achieved, places he went, and it just became a part of him. And for me, it was like, it's this connection to my dad that this is a part of him, and it's a part of everything that he did. And I think that's one of the cool things about watches, is that when we pass down a watch or we give a watch to somebody, we're not just giving the watch, we're not just giving the physical object, but we're giving all the things we achieved wearing that watch, all that that watch represents for us. We're giving more than just a physical object. We're giving a part of us to somebody else. And so for me to have this from my dad is so cool, because I feel like I've inherited so much, the knowledge he's gained along the way, all the achievements he's done, where he's brought our family. Like, it's so cool for me. And so I hope that one day I'll be able to pass down a watch to my son like that. For me, you know, I had to find my own style, right? Like, I couldn't, I'm not a silver and gold guy. And, you know, I even tried to get a Rolex that was like the Rolex version of this for myself. I even tried to do that, but it just wasn't the same, because it didn't carry all those memories. It didn't carry the same importance, the same sentimental value. Like, I have tools from my dad, Snap-on wrenches that have his employee number etched into them. And I hold on to those for sentimental value. And then, you know, my grandfather, not technically my grandfather, it's on my wife's side, but I have some of his architecture tools, because he did it, he drafted by hand. He was in that period, that era. And so, like, I don't ever use those. And I use my dad's tools sometimes when I'm working on the truck. But having a watch is something that it's special because you wear it daily. And it's something that you can appreciate and enjoy throughout the day. And so, like, my biggest regret, if I go back and do it again, my biggest regret is that I would go back and have a watch. Don't care the brand, don't care, you know, it didn't have to be something super fancy, but I wish I would have had a watch that I wore at our wedding, and that I wore at my son's birth, and that I could have and then pass down. And so some of my buddies have gotten into watches, and they got them before their kids were born, and I think that's super cool. And so, yeah, I do have watches that I want to pass down to my son that represent different things for me, but having this from my dad is probably one of the coolest things he's passed down to me because of what it represents. So this watch sparked this whole journey for me that I didn't even realize, because, you know, as a kid, I didn't know watches, and like, we didn't grow up with money. So like, I didn't know Rolex, I didn't know brands, any of that. I just knew this was the watch. And so, because I always saw my dad wearing a watch, and I always saw him wearing this specific watch, it made me want to get a watch. And so I was, you know, as we grow up and we mature, we kind of find our style, we find what we're into, we try different things out. And so, you know, I have a bunch of different watches that I've worn and that I bought along the way. And most of them were not expensive watches at all. At the time, to me, they were expensive, because I was like, who pays this much for a watch? And so as I've grown and as I've tried new things and figured out what I like and don't like, I've passed on those watches to friends. And so that's been one of the most enjoyable things about this hobby, about this passion, was being able to give those watches to friends. And so being able to give them a part of me and a part of the things that I've achieved, and spurring them on in their own collections and in their own desire to get watches and their own passion. And then to see them achieve things wearing those watches is really cool for me. No matter the price, no matter the name on the face of the watch, that's the coolest part for me. And then we will always share that connection. We always share it. And so whenever I hang out with them and I see one of them wearing the watch, I'm like, dude, that's so cool. I think it's the thing I appreciate most about this hobby. And so as I go further into this passion and this hobby and into watch collecting, and my hope is that I can still continue to do that, even though the watches do get more expensive. One of my big hopes, one of my big goals, is that when my dad retires, I hope that I'll be able to buy him the Rolex version of this. Because when I was talking to him and I asked him about it, he said, you know, I never thought ever a day in my life I could afford a Rolex. So I hope to get him the Rolex version of that watch one day when he retires, and I feel like that'd be a really cool moment, something that he deserves, something that he's earned. So if you have a quintessential watch in your mind, what is it and why? Leave it in the comments down below. Hopefully you guys enjoy the series. Hopefully you stick around to hear more about not just my watch collection, but some of the guys we're gonna be interviewing. Thank you again to Wolvyn Luxury Timepieces for sponsoring this series. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Crunch up that bell so you get notified every time I upload a video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Probably should have formatted these. Oh, that was crispy. Okay. Let's run it from the top. Okay.
You gonna be Hollywood though? Come on. Get over here.
Before the Timex, did you have a sundial?
No, didn't have a sundial. We just looked up in the sky, and we could see. And I could tell you when it was noon,
Yeah.
and I could tell you when the sun was setting, and when the sun was rising. I could tell you it was early, and it was late. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question.